Good morning, respected Chairman CA Harit Dhariwal sir, Chairman of the CPE Committee Rahul Maliwal ji, Chairman of the IDT Committee Bishan Shah, Secretary Anjali Choksi, Treasurer Sunil Sanghvi, and all the office bearers of ICAI, and all the dignitaries present in this august audience. I think it's an absolute privilege. I would term it as an absolute privilege to be addressing this august audience. And I would again like to take this opportunity to thank the Ahmedabad branch of WIRC of ICI, especially C. Harit Dhariwal sir, for giving me this opportunity, addressing this great audience. I'll try and make sure that I live up to the expectations of this great institute and deliver a good speech. Basically, when we talk about stock markets, there are many people who are talking about how to make money. You should see this chart, you should see that chart, breakthrough hai, ye hai, wo hai. But what I feel is that this should be seen in a little different way. That's why when I was asked to take up a session on the stock markets, I said that why should I include how to not lose money in stock markets? And Harit Dhariwal sir agreed to it, and I think it's a privilege to talking to this audience. So I think this is the second best negative that one can appreciate in a life. The first one being a negative COVID test, and the second one being not to lose money. So my entire discussion is based on how to actually not lose money in stock markets. Before I start, I'll give you a standard disclaimer. I work at a firm called PRSSB Limited, and we are not SEBI registered investment advisors. In this presentation, I'll be talking about many stocks, but none of them should be taken as a recommendation. I would strongly request you to consult your financial advisor and do your due diligence before investing in that stock. So the first thing that I would like to talk about is the golden rule of Warren Buffett. Any conversation about the stock market is not true unless and until we do not name Warren Buffett. So the golden rule of Warren Buffett is that, for first rule, never lose money, and rule number 2, never forget rule number 1. So my entire presentation is based upon never losing money only. I'll just brief you through my session agenda. So, we as brokers have been getting this question where often and not, that why are markets so high? 50,000 Sensex tha, 60,000 ho gaya. Should you invest? Should you not invest? But I would strongly this would be my strong submission to you, that there are clear reasons. There are clear reasons as to why the markets is rising. So I'll be talking about why the markets are so resilient in spite of the fact that there is stress in the economy. Another question that we keep getting is that about the PE ratio. So is it really relevant? Is it not relevant? Should you look at it? Should you completely avoid it? Should you look at it with some other perspective also, or should you look at it just in entirety? I'll be talking about that too. Apart from that, in this very presentation, I think this is one of my favorite parts, where I'll be busting some of the common myths of the stock market. So, when we go to family gatherings or when we go to some functions, then, there are people who are talking about, boss, this is the thing in the stock market, you should do it. But I think these are myths, and these need to be busted. Apart from that, this is one of the main agenda of my presentation, that what if someone comes you and gives you a stock tip? You need to do just 15 things before you invest in a stock. that takes 20 minutes of your time, just 20 minutes of your time, but you can save yourself from losing the money. And that is the entire agenda of this presentation. Apart from that, I'll also be talking about how to create a winning portfolio, a portfolio that has tested the tides of time, what to buy, which sectors to look at, when should you actually sell a stock. I'll also be taking about a very interesting concept of the fish and pond philosophy. I think that is very relevant when you are selling or buying into any stock. So without wasting much of the time, I'll just quickly get down to the agenda. So the first section of my presentation is, why are markets so high? I think we all must always appreciate the fact that in the long term, markets always follow earnings. If the earnings are high, then the markets will continue to remain high. So I have listed just three simple reasons, which will justify the fact that why are markets so high. The first one being the high and resilient earnings growth. Apart from that, we are living in a lower interest rate environment, and this is also having some of its impacts on the valuations of the markets. I'll also be talking about some of the economic indicators that are firing up. Yes, I mean it, they are firing up. You might have a question that, boss, GDP बढ़ नहीं रहा है, so how can you say the economic indicators are firing up? But yes, I'll prove you with numbers that GDP is not the best measure to look at an economy. So the first one is the high earnings growth. No chance. So the first one, so look at this chart and look at this number. This is the chart of the Nifty's EPS for the last 10 years. And look at this number. In the 10 years, the Nifty EPS never crossed the 500 mark. In fact, it barely reached the 500 mark in FY19 at 483. And look at this number. The Nifty EPS for FY21 was 540. Yes. And this is despite the fact that April, May, and June 20 was a complete washout. So imagine in a situation that 10 years, the Nifty EPS was not able to grow, it was going nowhere. And suddenly the Nifty EPS has jumped to above 500. So I think, this is the reason why markets are capturing, the high earnings growth. The Bloomberg consensus estimate for the Nifty EPS is 740 for the coming year and 860 for FY23. So if we take this estimate into account, then maybe Nifty is trading at just 20x price to earnings. So you would appreciate the fact that earnings are showing a very resilient growth in spite of the fact that there is stress in the economy. And markets are exactly capturing this earnings. Apart from that, the constituents of Nifty have also changed with time. And that is also shooting up in the numbers. So, in the past few months, the constituents like Divi's Lab, Asian Paints, Britannia, Titan, Nestle, Bajaj Finance, Bajaj Finserv have all entered the markets. All they entered the Nifty 50. And this is the composition of the Nifty is also changing. So despite the fact that Nifty historically traded at 13 to 14x price earnings, it is now trading at 20x price to earnings. This is the sole and the most important reason as to why markets are showing a resilient growth. I'll come to the second most important reason, and this is the low interest rate environment. So not just RBI, but Federal Reserve, Bank of Japan, Bank of England, ECB, all of them are keeping interest rates low. In fact, the Fed has kept interest rates at 0%. So imagine there is no cost of money. In fact, in India also, if you look at a historical number, the interest rates used to remain in 6.5 to 7 range, and now they are at just 4%. So they have fallen by roughly 40-45%. And when you do a small DCF valuation while valuing companies, you would see that just a small 1% fall in the interest rate also can lift the valuations by roughly 15%. So low interest rate environments combined with a high earnings growth is keeping the markets high. And this would be my humble submission to you that waiting for the markets to fall to invest may not be a good idea for you. So we would suggest you to look for companies that are actually growing, and they are growing fast. Apart from that, I'll also be talking about the economic indicators. About the economic indicators, you would argue that the GDP of the economy is not showing a growth. Then why are the economic indicators you say that are firing up? But let me give you some numbers around the GST collections. Now look at this chart, the GST collections. The GST collections have crossed the 1 trillion mark for almost every month after September 20, barring the June 21 numbers. So in spite the fact that GDP is not growing, I think there is a lot of economic activity happening in the market also. And due to data mining and due to due to the implementation of GST, many unorganized sectors are coming up in the organized space as well. So GST collection is one indicator which suggests that the economy is actually booming up. Apart from that, if you look at indicators like e-way bills, if you look at indicators like export numbers, the export number for August was $33 billion. For July, it was $35 billion. The e-way bills were past the 7 crore marks. So the PMI manufacturing for July was above 50. It was 55, and any reading above 50 means an expansion of the economy. So this would be my humble submission to you that GDP is a lag measure. Yes, it's a measure that is estimated. Yes, it is estimated by different agencies differently. There'll be Nomura, there'll be Morgan Stanley, there'll be SBI Cap who will be estimating GDP for a particular period, and they'll be estimating the GDP for a particular, and it gets continuously revised. So what happens is that markets tend to look beyond GDP. They are looking for numbers that are real time. And because these numbers are real time and they are showing resilience, I think the sheer sustenance of the market is here to stay. I'll be coming to the next section of my presentation, and that is the PE ratio. We as brokers get asked a lot of times that should we look at PE ratio? Should we not look at it? Is it relevant? Is it irrelevant? What all other things that you should look at in a PE ratio? So PE ratio is a simple price by earnings ratio. What we as investors do is that we try to give too much importance to price, but we do not give due importance to earnings. I think due importance should be given to earnings also. And by earnings, I don't mean just earnings. I mean the growth of those earnings, the consistent growth of that earnings, and the sheer resilience with which the earnings are growing. Also, you should try and not look at PE ratio in isolation. Rather, I would suggest to you to look at PE ratios and compare it with the peer group companies and compare it with the industry PE ratio. Here, I'll give you a very simple example. Look at the PE ratio of Asian Paints. Look at the PE ratio of Asian Paints. It is close to 95. And look at the PE ratio of Kansai Nerolac. It is 55. And the PE ratio of AkzoNobel, it is 30. All the companies in the same paints industry, and there is so much distortion in the PE ratio. One trading at 95 times earnings, one trading at 55 times earnings, and one trading at 35 times earnings. You should try and look at the reasons behind those reasons why a company is trading at 90 times and why a company is trading at 30 times. The simple reason is that Asian Paints is into decorative paints, but AkzoNobel is into industrial paints. So what happens is that Asian Paints is having higher margins compared to AkzoNobel, which is into industrial paints and it is having a lower margin. Apart from that, you can also calculate the working capital cycle of Asian Paints. It is close to 30-35 days, which is not the case with Kansai, which is not the case with AkzoNobel. So, in spite the fact that all the three companies are in the same industry, they are trading at different multiples. This is also true to do with the fact that Asian Paints had been trading at such a multiple for not just a couple of years. It has been trading at such a multiple for almost a decade now. Along with PE ratio, I would also urge you to look at the risk reward ratio. The risk reward ratio is very important in the sense that if you are, when you try and buy a stock, try to analyze the intrinsic value of that stock and whether that intrinsic value is way above your entry price. If it is way above your entry price, then your risk reward ratio is favorable and the chances of going it are low. So if the chances of going it are very low and the chances of going it are very high, then you have a risk reward ratio which is favorable. Apart from that, I would also urge you to look at the margin of safety. It is a single most important thing which an investor should look at before investing in a company, and ensure that the price that you pay for the stock justifies the growth that it is going to give you, and how much of that value is captured in the DCF in the first portion and how much is it captured in the terminal value. I would suggest you to look at the price earnings to growth ratio. So I'll give you two companies. Company A, which is growing at 50 times price, which is trading at 50 times price to earnings, and company B, which is trading at 15 times price to earnings. Tell me, which company would you invest in? Which company looks optically cheap to you? You can type your answers in the chat box. Of company A, which is trading at 50 times, and company B, which is trading at 15 times, 1-5. Which one looks cheaper to you? If I had given you just this information, which company would you invest in? I would request you to type your answers in the chat box. Right, right. So most of you, as I can see, have named company B. But now look at the growth expectations of the company. So the company A is expected to grow at 25% and company B is expected to grow at just 5%. So the PEG ratio, price earnings by growth ratio of company A is coming at 2, whereas the price earnings to growth ratio of company B is coming at 3. So optically, a company that looks cheap to you is actually expensive. And it does make sense to invest in company A. That's why we urge you to not just look at price earnings ratio in isolation, rather try and evaluate the growth prospects of that company. Because if you are living in a country like India and if you are not investing in companies that are growing to grow, then I think it is not worth investing in India. So this is the table that I was talking about. Ideally, a PEG ratio of less than 1 is considered to be the best, because that means that the growth prospects of the company are very high. And believe me, this PEG ratio is available free of cost on the websites that I'm going to talk about. The ratios that I'm going to talk about in section 4. These are available completely free of cost to all the investors. And you must look at this PEG ratio before you invest in any company. I'll also be taking a simple example of ITC and HUL. ITC and HUL. Both of them are in a similar industry, that is FMCG, right? Still, ITC is getting a PE ratio of 21x and HUL is getting a PE ratio of 77x. Now, if you take a third company in this group, Nestle is getting a PE ratio of 86 times price to earnings. So what could possibly be the reasons why ITC is trading at 21 times, HUL is trading at a way higher multiple than ITC? If you have any suggestions, you can always type it in the chat box. Any reasons why ITC is getting such a low multiple and HUL is getting a very high multiple? I'll tell you the same. ITC and HUL, both of them are generating tremendous free cash flows. But just generating tremendous free cash flows and having a lot of cash on your balance sheet is not going to make you money. Yes, many of you have written about the hotels and the cigarettes business. Yes, it's correct. The ROCE of the hotels business of ITC is just 3%, whereas markets are not going to give you a high multiple unless you reinvest those cash flows to make more money out of it. So ITC, because it is into a conglomerate, it was doing the cigarettes business, then it started the FMCG business, it also started the agri business, side by side it's doing the printers and stationery business. So it is into so many non-related, the hotels business, so many non-related businesses, that it is getting a conglomerate discount. But if you look at most of the successful companies that are trading at PE ratios north of 50, 60, 70, 80 times, what have all they done is they have entered in one area, they have mastered that area, and then they have entered into the adjacencies of those areas. I'll give you a very simple example. Astral Poly. Astral is an Ahmedabad based company. It was originally into CPVC pipes. It captured the CPVC market and then it entered into an adjacent area of adhesives. After that, it entered Uh, After that, it entered the area of tanks. Similarly is the case with Divi's Lab. Similarly is the case with Asian Paints, Pidilite Industries, all of those successful companies. What have they done is they have entered into a market. The promoter has created high barriers to entry, and then he has generated tremendous amount of free cash flows from that business, and again found out other profit pools where he can reinvest those cash flows, where he can actually reinvest those cash flows successfully and generate more cash flows. So often we see that there are companies which are having, some 1,000 crores, 2,000 crores, 5,000 crores on their balance sheet. But just having those cash on the balance sheet is not going to give you a high multiple. The market wants that you invest those cash into another, you find out another those profit pools, and you reinvest that cash and you again generate a better ROC. So Nestle's ROC is like 60%. This is because they have found out those profit pools where they can invest those cash flows into other different businesses and generate tremendous wealth for their shareholders. Now I'll be coming to my favorite portion of this presentation, and it's about the common myths in a stock market. So the first myth that I want to talk about is high debt companies. We always believe that a company with a high debt is considered as a bad investment. But my humble submission to you is that just because the debt of the company is high doesn't mean that it is bad. What you must always look at it is whether the company is able to service its debt way beyond better than other companies. So I'll give you a simple example. Laurus Labs. This share was trading at 100 rupees, 104 rupees in last June. Yes, it was trading at 104 rupees. This is adjusted for the face value. First, the face value was rupees 10 and now it is rupees 2. So I have 500 is adjusted to 100. Look at the revenue of the business in March 2020. It was roughly 2,800 crores. And in March 2021, the revenue of the company shooted to 4,800 crores. Imagine a business where your revenue is 3,000 crores and it becomes 5,000 crores. Your profit is 250 crores and it becomes 1,000 crores. And it is having tremendous debt on its balance sheet. In fact, its debt equity ratio is close to 0.7. The debt on the balance sheet has in fact increased from 1,080 crores to 1,482 crores. So what did this company do that it has given 6x returns to investors? The single most important thing that it has done is it has taken the advantage of operating leverage. So for 3 years, they were building assets on their balance sheet, but not a single rupee of revenue was coming from those assets. So markets were very skeptical about the company. But as soon as their capex was complete, their revenue just shooted up. It shooted up from 2,800 crores to 4,800 crores, and their margins they've become phenomenal. If you look at the return on capital, it is close to 40%. Now this was done in spite the fact that there was so much debt on the balance sheet. So my humble suggestion to you is don't just look at the fact that the company has debts on its books and it is bad. In fact, try and evaluate whether the debt is taken for growth or whether it is taken to meet just the working capital needs. I think if it is taken for growth and if the company has enough ability to service that debt, If the company has enough abilities to service that debt, then I believe that debt is not always bad on the balance sheet. So this is the first myth that I want to bust. In fact, the cost of debt, KD, is actually brings down your overall cost of equity. So your cost of debt, KD, is interest 1 minus tax, and your cost of equity is RF plus beta RM minus RF. So what happens is that when you are coming as an investor in the stock market, your return expectations are north of 15-16%. So that is the cost of equity. But if you are the cost of debt is way much lower. So if you have some amount of debt on your balance sheet, then your overall cost of capital comes down. So it does not mean that just because there is high debt on the company, it means the company is bad. The second myth that I want to bust is low PE ratios are good. This, in my opinion, is also a myth. As we have always discussed that, you should never look at a PE ratio in isolation. In fact, you should look at PE ratio combined with growth. If there is no growth in the business, no much howsoever the cheap the company is, you will not make money. Yes, that's a fact. In a longer term, you will not make money in the stock markets. So my humble suggestion to you is to actually see the growth prospects of the company. There are multiple media companies, newspaper companies that have traded at between 5 to 10x for a very long period of time, for over a decade. Because when investors do the DCF valuation, the terminal value of that company is very low. So I would again request you to not just look at a low PE ratio and invest into a company. Rather, look at the growth prospects of the company. In fact, in the coming slides, I'll be taking the names of the websites and just the 15 things that you should see if someone gives you a stock tip. And this is going to complement all those things that I'm talking about right now. So this is the third slide that I'm talking about, and it is that just because the stock is trading at a 52-week low doesn't mean the stock is good. I'll just give you a small example. All of you can do this exercise on your own. Go to the annual report of the Yes Bank and go to the page number 242 of the PDF, the 2018 annual report. There it was very clearly mentioned. In fact, what happened is in 2018, RBI did a asset quality review of all the banks, and the gross NPAs reported by Yes Bank and the gross NPAs that were calculated by RBI, there was a huge divergence in those two reported numbers, and it was clearly there in the annual report of 2018. I would urge all of you to go and check it. So just because a stock is trading at a 52-week low doesn't make it a good stock. In fact, most of the times it is the institutional investors who smell something fishy and they leave it. And it is the retail shareholders who, the stock was 300, now it is 30. So they feel that it is optically cheap and they get into it, but they never try and make money. So this is also my humble submission to you, that just because a stock is as a 52-week low doesn't make it a good stock. In fact, sometimes it's prudent to book a loss in order to avoid further loss of your capital. So in my last section, I'll be also talking about how to make up a portfolio. I'll also be talking about how you can actually further avoid a loss by booking a loss at this point of time. I'll be coming to the fourth section of my presentation, and that is on what to do if someone gives you a stock tip. Yes, do these 15 things. Do these just 15 things. 12 on screener.in, 2 on value research, and 1 on research bytes. Yes, just these 15 things you do, and I'm sure that you'll at least avoid a dubious company. So let's get started. As I've said, what to do if someone gives you a stock tip. Just follow the rule of 15, and look at these 12 aspects on screener.in, 2 aspects on valueresearch.online.com, and 1 aspect on researchbytes.com. In fact, I'll also be live showing you the website of Screener, Value Research, and Research Bytes. It is available free of cost, and I would urge every investor to look at these 3 websites. I think these give a lot of insights about your investee companies. So what are the aspects to look upon on Screener? The single most important aspect to look upon on Screener is ROCE. ROCE is return on capital employed. Now, typically an Indian company, if you, barring the last a year and a half when the cost of capital has come down for some of the well-run companies, most of the companies are actually having a cost of capital that is roughly 15%. So if your company is not making a return on capital employed in north of 15%, then I think that your company is actually not profitable for you. Yes. And whilst you look at the return on capital employed, I would urge you to look at a return on capital employed for a 10-year period. And this is the good thing about screener.in that I like, is that they give you 10-year data on just one page. So you don't need to flip and flop the balance sheets to actually check the return on capital employed. It is there just on your screen. Also, I would urge you to look for companies that are consistently growing their return on capital employed. So there'll be companies I would, look for promoters who are actually coming into a business. They are championing that sector. Then they are generating massive amounts of free cash flow in those sectors. And then they are reinvesting those free cash flows in another businesses which are as much profitable, in fact, more profitable and more accretive to the shareholders. So my humble suggestion to you is to look at companies which are having a good ROCE. A ROCE of 20% is a must for you to invest. Yes, there may be cases where, if a company is into expansion mode, then there'll be cases where the ROCE for a few years is depressed. But more or less, this is a ballpark number that you should look at. Apart from that, the second aspect that I'm going to talk about is the revenue growth. If you are investing in a company and the company is not able to grow its revenues by 12 to 15%, then I think in a longer period of time, you might not be able to make money. By longer period of time, I mean 3 to 5 years. You will actually not be able to make money. So look for growth that is consistent, look for the longevity of that growth, and analyze the drivers of that growth. So I'll just again give you a simple example of Laurus Labs. So what happened was Laurus Labs was a company that was primarily a ARV API company. By ARV API, I mean antiretroviral drugs. So it used to produce antiretroviral drug APIs. And most of its revenues was coming from this one region only. But what the promoter did was that he diversified into formulations. He diversified into CRAMS business. He diversified into custom synthesis business. He also diversified into biosynthesis business. And these are actually the drivers of the growth for the coming few years for this company. By no means this is a recommendation, but this is just an example to give you as to how you can look at the drivers of growth. So whenever you take up a company, ask yourself a simple question. If this company is deriving revenues from, say, one business, second business, what will be the next drivers of growth? What is the next business that it is going to do that it can derive revenue? Also look for consistent growth. I think market rewards consistency over one-offs. There is a small quiz that I'm going to play with you. Also look for earnings growth. So this is the example of a steel company. Any guesses on which steel company is this? You can write your answers in the chat box. Any guesses of which steel? What is the balance sheet? Which company's balance sheet am I talking about? It is a very yes. Yes, it is Tata Steel. Look at the revenue growth of the company. In 10 years, it has gone up, it has gone down, but it has never remained consistent. And look at the earnings of the company, the net profit of the company. It was minus 2000 crores in 2010. It again increased to 9000 crores. Then it again decreased. Then it again increased. So in spite of the fact that the EPS of the company is 170 rupees, the market is giving it just a 8x multiple. Just a 8x. So it's just a 7 to 8x multiple that a market is giving it. And this, look at this balance sheet. This is the balance sheet of an adhesive company. Any guesses on which company is this? I'll give you a hint. You use that material in your everyday life, the product of that company in everyday life. Yes, it's Pidilite. Yes. And look at the sort of distortion in the company, the distortion in the valuation of these two companies. So there's a company which is having a growth, a revenue of 1 lakh crores. And there's a company which is having a revenue of just 8,000 crores. And there's one company, it is an established group, it is a great group, very clean group, but still market is giving it a very small multiple of just 8 times price to earnings. And compared to that, there is another company in the adhesives where the market is giving it a multiple of more than 100 times. So it is factoring in some growth, but you look at the sheer consistency with which the revenues and the profit has grown. Year upon year, the revenues and the profits have grown consistently for 15%. So my humble suggestion to you is to look at the revenue growth and the profit growth of the company and look at the consistency of that growth. In fact, this is a screenshot from screener.in only. I'll also show you that once I complete all the slides. Another aspect that one should look at is the cash flow from operations. So, a positive cash flow from operation is an indication that the business is thriving. Yes. And try to analyze whether how much of the EBITDA of the company is converted into the cash flows. The better the conversion of the EBITDA into cash flow, the better is the business of the company. And in fact, this is a real profitability of the company. In fact, I have one more quiz for you. This is the cash flow from operations of a real estate company. This is the cash flow from operations of a real estate company. A very well-known real estate company. Any guesses on which company is this? No, it's not DLF. It's not DLF. No, it is not even Godrej Properties. but it is one of the very well-known real estate companies. It is India Bulls Real Estate. It is India Bulls Real Estate. And see, in last 10 years, 5 were those years when the cash flow from operations of the company was negative. Yes, the cash flow from operations of the company was negative. And look at the price chart of the company of the last 5 years. If you had entered somewhere in June or July of 2017 at close to 250 rupees, you would have actually destroyed 40% of your wealth. Yes, you would have destroyed 40% of your wealth. So what I would request you to do is to at least check whether the cash flow from operations of a company is positive or not. That is a basic thing to check, because better in fact it is always said that profit and loss account is the easiest financial statement to manipulate, and cash flow statement is the most difficult statement to manipulate. So you might be having great earnings, but if those earnings are not converted into cash flows, then I think your returns on the stock are going to go nowhere. The fifth and the sixth aspect that I'm going to talk about is the debt equity ratio and debt in absolute terms. No doubt debt is a double-edged sword, but you must always look whether that debt is actually for the growth of the company, or whether it is to just fulfill the working capital needs of the company. And also, there is no ballpark number for an ideal debt or a debt equity ratio. But of course, a lower debt to equity ratio would usually give the company a higher valuation, because the interest burden on the company will not be high. But try to actually analyze what are the reasons behind the increase in debt. Like we talked in Laurus Labs, they took debt for growth, and that growth has given stellar numbers and stellar returns to investors. But ideally, a debt equity ratio of less than 1 would be considered good. This is an aspect that I've taken from a very well-known book, The Financial Shenanigans. I would request all of you to read that book, Financial Shenanigans. Debtors as a percentage of sales. So what happens is, some companies, in order to show extraordinary sales growth, they'll have the sales growing at 20, 25, 30%. But none of them is actually converted into cash. It is just that it is going on credit, and someday that ball is going to bust. So I would request you to look at debtors as a percentage of sales, and if these are increasing, then I think there is a red flag. The book that I was talking about was Financial Shenanigans. I'll write that on the board. Financial Shenanigans. I think it's a very good book, and it gives you great ratios that you can look at. So this is also a small quiz. The company is no longer traded. The company is no longer traded on the stock exchange. But any guesses on which this company is? I'll give you a small hint. The company used to manufacture printers, and the promoter is a Japanese promoter. Any guesses on which company is this? No, it's not Epson. No, it's not Canon too. No, it was traded on the Indian stock exchanges only, but unfortunately that company is no longer traded now. It is Ricoh India. It is Ricoh India. Yes, it's Ricoh India. So look at these numbers. The debtors and the sales. And look at here, it was roughly 30% in 2014. And look at here, it increased to 50% as a percentage of sales. Here all more than 50%. Here too more than 50%. So, one day your business, in a particular year, your business was trading at, I mean, the debtors as a percentage of sales were 30%, which continually kept increasing. So this was a kind of red flag that could have avoided a lot of losses. I'll be coming to the eighth aspect, and which is a CFO as a percentage of EBITDA, which is almost discussed in the CFO portion also. So try and analyze as to how much of that EBITDA is converted into cash flows. The better the conversion, the better is the company. You should also try and look at the capital work in progress to the gross block. So if a high ratio of capital work in progress to gross block, then it may indicate that there is unsubstantiated capex. So the company is actually not able to manage its capex well. So try to analyze this ratio also. And you can simply look all of these on screener.in. Apart from that, you should also look at the working capital cycle, the promoter's shareholding, and the credit rating of the company. So on Screener, you will also find the working capital cycle, the promoter's shareholding. Try to analyze that why, if the promoter's shareholding is falling by a substantiated pace, then it should be a red flag for you. A lower working capital cycle is a good indication because it means that the company is effectively able to manage its working capital well. In fact, there are companies in the market which are having a negative working capital cycle. It means that the company is doing business on the supplier's money. So that's one of the ideal situations to be in. So try and look for these ratios as well. This is also a small quiz about the promoter shareholding that fell from September 2018 from 40% to roughly 4% now. Any guesses on which this company is? I think the promoter has been in the news for a very long period of time. I'll give you a small hint. It belongs to the TV industry, the entertainment and TV industry. Yes, you are correct. It's Z. It's Z. So the promoter shareholding has fallen substantially in the last 3 years. So I would also urge you to look all upon these on screener.in. You can also get the credit rating report of any company on screener.in, and you can read the synopsis before investing in a company. These are the aspects that I would suggest you to look up on valueresearch.com. These are three small scores that I would suggest you to look upon. One is the Z score, one is the F score, and one is the C score. So the Z score is going to talk about the solvency of the company, whether the company is solvent or not. The F score is going to talk about the financial performance of the company in last 1 year. Whereas the C score is going to determine whether creative accounting can be detected through the financial numbers. So whether the company is booking up, it's making up its financial statements or whether it's not making up its financial statements. So I'll quickly move on to just screener screen. Is it visible to all of you? The screener. Is it visible? The screener.
Yes, it is visible.
Okay. Thank you. So you go to screener.in, you get a lot of information about the company. This is the profit and loss account of the company. The 10 years consolidated profit and loss you can view just on one page. Similarly, you can also view the 10-year balance sheet on one page as well. This I'm showing for Tata Steel, but you can look up for any company here. Similarly, you can also look at cash flows for 10 years, ratios, the various working capital cycle, return on capital employed, working capital days. Also, you can look upon the promoter's shareholding, whether it has increased, whether it has decreased. You can also get the annual reports, the credit rating reports that I was talking about. You can get here on the screener, screener homepage itself. So just go to screener.in and just type the company that you want to look upon. Similarly, value research that I talked about. So here I was talking about those scores. So look at this company. Here I've opened the score for Divi's Labs. Divi's Lab is probably the best API company in India. It is the most profitable API company in India. And look at the scores. Look at these scores, the Z score of the company. So there is absolutely no threat to the solvency. The company has done fantastic in the last 1 year, and the books of accounts of the company have not been modified. These are available free of cost on screen on value research. Similarly, you can also look upon the valuation. What has the valuation been in the last 1 year? What is the minimum, maximum, and the median PE ratio, PB ratio, the PEG ratio that I was talking about? You can also look at up on the screener. And I think these two metrics will give you a lot of insight about if someone gives you a stock tip, you do those 12 things on screener, you do these two things on value research, and one more thing that I'm going to talk about is Research Bytes. So we as investors are have little role to play in the actual management of the company. So I would request you to give disproportionate importance to the managements. And these managements have given several interviews on CNBC, on ET Now, and various other channels, Bloomberg Quint, and various other channels. And you can get all those interviews in just one click. So you go to researchbytes.com, you type the name of the script here. Let's say here I have typed, suppose, Asian Paints. So here you get the management interviews of all those management interviews that were given in the past. Similarly, you can even get investor presentations, annual reports, investor con calls, everything in just one click. You don't even need to go to YouTube to search it. I would humbly urge you to at least look at last 3 to 4 management interviews and try to make a view about how the person is who is sitting at the helm, and how is he running the company. Is he capable enough? You can get some insights. So I'll come back to the presentation. Here I even talked about the Z score, and I even showed you the valuation matrix that you can see on screener. And I also talked about Research Bytes and where you can look upon on researchbytes.com. I think this is the most difficult question to answer on how to create a winning portfolio. I have some rules that I'm going to discuss with you about how to create a portfolio which is balanced. Always try and create a portfolio that is balanced. So this is the basic asset allocation rule. There are just 5 asset classes: equity, fixed income, real estate, commodity, and gold. Not a 6th asset class exists. And there is this rule of 100. So if you are 40 years old, then not more than 60%. So 100 minus your age should be there in your stocks. So this, helps you to reduce your risk. If you are, let's say, 60 years old, then it makes sense to have more fixed income and less amount of equity, so that, your afterlife is good. So follow this rule of 100, that, 100 minus your age should be the amount of equity that is there in your portfolio. I'll be talking about some of the basic portfolio rules that I as an investor and we at PRSSB follow. So an ideal portfolio is the one where you have 10 to 25 stocks. Having more than 30 to 35 stocks in a portfolio will not generate more returns in monetary terms. So I would suggest you to have just 10 to 25 stocks. And allocation to a particular stock should not be less than 1% and not more than 20%. Not less than 1% primarily because less than 1% I consider it as a tail stock, and even if it grows multifold, the returns in monetary terms are not going to be high. Apart from that, you should also ensure that your top 3 holdings of the portfolio are below 40%, and your allocation to a particular sector is also below 40%. Also try to make sure that your stocks do not have liquidity issues. Yes, there are stocks in the small cap, in the micro cap space where there are liquidity issues. So try and ensure that whenever you have stocks that you can quickly sell off and get money on your hand. Apart from portfolio rules, I've also tried to list few things that I feel that you should consider when you are buying a stock. So price is what you pay and value is what you get, is what Warren Buffett said in his 2008 letter to his shareholders. So this is my humble submission to you, is that you look for growth with a reasonable price. So the price that you pay for the stock should actually justify the growth that the company is going to give you in the coming years. So here the PEG ratio is a bit helpful for you. Apart from that, try to look for spaces where there are high barriers to entry. So let's say I'll talk about Divi's Lab. So what has Divi's Lab done is that of the 20 largest pharmaceutical companies of the world, they have an agreement with roughly 6 to 8 pharmaceutical companies, and they are making a very important API by the name of naproxen. So when let's say a Pfizer makes a final formulation, what happens is that they need to register the API supplier with the US FDA. And to replace that API supplier, it is very difficult because you need to again go through the process of those US FDA before you can actually change the supplier. So Divi's Lab has created such high barriers to entry in its business that it becomes it becomes difficult for anyone else to replicate that business. Also, I would suggest to you to look at concentrated profit pools. By concentrated profit pools, I mean companies where the profits of the sector are shared by just 1, 2, or 3 players. And if you are betting on the right player, then you can make tremendous amounts of wealth. Also, as a thumb rule, you should always look for sectors which are going to grow more than 15% for the next 3-4 years. So let's say a sector like CPVC pipes, it is poised to grow at 15 to 20% for the next 5 to 7 years, especially because of the fact that the government spending on Nal Se Jal and Jal Jeevan Mission of roughly 1 lakh crores per annum is humongous for a sector like this. And try to actually pick up the winners of those sectors and analyze whether the price that you're paying, will it justify the growth that it is going to give you in the coming years. Also, I would suggest that you should avoid dubious companies, and I've given a whole list of things, just 15 things that you should do to avoid those dubious companies, and have a disciplined portfolio approach. Also, portfolio management is not a game of deterministic approach. It is a game of probabilistic approach. I'll just take a minute to explain that. So by deterministic approach, I mean, let's say if I as a portfolio manager say that company A is trading at, let's say, rupees 100. Company A is trading at rupees 100. And if I say that the company in 2 years is going to become rupees 200. That's a deterministic approach. But I would suggest you to have a probabilistic approach. An investor should always try to analyze the probability and the how many odds are will be there in his favor. So you should create three scenarios: bull scenario, bear scenario, and a base case scenario. So if it's a bull scenario, maybe it will become 250. If it's a bear scenario, maybe it will become just 130. And if it's a base case scenario, maybe it will become 180. I think this is the way you should approach any company, because nothing is certain. I think nothing is certain. And talking in terms of probabilities will actually give you a lot to think about rather than talking in terms of deterministic approach. I'll also try and answer a very difficult question on when to sell a stock. My first sentence in this slide is that rise of price is not a reason to sell a stock. Yes, rise of price, and especially in a short term, it should never be a reason for you to sell a stock. In fact, before selling, you should try and look at the size of opportunity for the company. So I'll just give you a small example of the fish and pond experiment that we practiced, and I think it's a very relevant experiment given which can help you to actually determine whether the stock that you're selling, are you selling it early or are you selling it at the right time. So the fish is the company and the pond is the size of opportunity. So whenever you are trying to sell a stock, just try to analyze that of the four blocks that I've shown you, the company falls into which block. Whether it is a big fish in a big pond, or whether it is a small fish in a big pond, whether it is a small fish in a small pond, or whether it is a big fish in a small pond. Can any one of you tell me? What is the most ideal scenario to have a company in? Out of these four, which is the ideal scenario which you think should be there for a company? I mean, which one would you prefer? Yes, perfect. It's big fish in a big pond. Because if your fish is big, then your fish is established. And if the fish is established, then it is difficult to kill that fish. Similarly, if the pond is big, then the opportunity size for the company is even bigger. So yes, the correct answer is big fish and big pond. So I'll just stop here. I think I'll just stop here, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to address them. Harit sir?
Sir, there is a question in chat box. You can see it if you are able to.
Right. Gaurav Vyas is asking, in your opinion, where you see the markets in 1 to 2 months? I think my reply to you, Gaurav, is to not look at the index level, but to look at the company level. GDP में क्या होगा, market में क्या होगा, should not be your basis of investing. Rather, you should try to look at आपकी company में क्या होगा, because there are companies who have moved nowhere, but the stock price has increased. I mean, the market has increased phenomenally, but there are companies who have moved nowhere. So I would suggest you to not just look at a 1 to 2 month margin or a 1 to 2 month time frame. Rather, I would humbly urge you to take a broader picture in mind. chat box on chat. Okay, you can type your questions in the chat box, or I'll not be able to give you an opinion on ITC at this on this platform, uh, but what I would suggest you to do is to look at its FMCG business, because FMCG business is a business which takes almost 20 years to build up. So if the you try to analyze what sort of changes has the company done in the FMCG business, and whether it is allocating more capital to the hotels business or not, based on that you can take a view on whether you would like the stock or not. How about a small fish in a big pond? I think I would not prefer a small fish in a big pond. I would prefer more of a big fish in a big pond. The reason being that the small fish has not developed so amount of barriers to entry. So if there is some other player that is coming up, then that small fish might die. So I would suggest you to not look for small fish in a big pond, rather look for big fish in a big pond, and try to analyze three things: whether the company is having clean books, whether it is having a high barriers to entry, and whether it is selling essential products, and the price at which it is available, does it justify the future prospects of growth of that company. When one can see that the share is particular overvalued or not? I think I've talked about a few metrics that you can look upon: the price earnings to growth. If you're looking at a banking company, then you should try to look at the price to book ratio, the capital adequacy ratio, and try to compare it with the industry average, try to compare it with uh, the ratios of the peers in the group, and try to analyze what is actually creating those difference between the price earnings of different companies. So the example that I gave you for Asian Paints was similar to that. Go for large cap, mid cap, or small cap share. I think you should not look at a share just by the fact that it is a mid cap or a large cap or it's a small cap share. Rather, try to analyze whether the company, what sort of a business is the company in, because there are small cap companies which have become large cap, and there are large cap companies which have become mid cap also. I'll just give you a very interesting insight from a book that I read recently. So almost 20% of the BSE 500 constituents get churned every 3 years. 20% of the BSE 500 constituents. So your being sector or cap agnostic is not going to be as much profitable as it is going to be about what the business the company is in. Has it created barriers to entry, or is there someone who can replicate that business or not? In this bull run, most of the companies are at high PE. What should we check other than growth rate in such scenario? Uh, uh, I would I would suggest you to I mean, it's not that all the companies are in a high valuation mode. There are companies which are fairly priced. Uh, there are companies which are even trading at attractive valuations. And if you ask me what other things to check, what should check other than growth rate in such scenario? I think growth is just one factor that you should check. In fact, you should try and analyze how for how many years is that growth going to come, and try to derive what are the drivers of that growth. So has the promoter identified other profit pools where they can invest those free cash flows generated from a business and generate even more returns? That is something that you should check. What you say about mutual fund or particular shares? Nikunsha, I didn't quite get you there. Whether to invest through mutual fund or invest in shares, which one is more advisable? If you have time to analyze the companies yourself, if you have time to read the last 3 to 4 years annual reports, the investor presentation, then it doesn't make sense to invest through mutual funds. But if you are selecting a mutual fund, try to not just look at the past performance of the company, but even see as to how the fund manager is actually positioning his portfolio, and what the expense ratio is, and whether because mutual funds, they are mandated by SEBI to disclose their transactions every month. So you should analyze that before you invest in a mutual fund. And if you don't want to think anything, then I think ETF is the best option to go, where you can save your expense ratio, where the expense ratio is minimal, and your returns will almost be like the market. What are the sectors you suggest for near future? Okay. By no means this should be taken as a recommendation, but you should look for sectors that are growing to grow at 15 to 20% CAGR. So sectors like building materials, or sectors like banking, where banking, the credit growth in India is very low and it is growing at a fast pace, or those kind of sectors that you should look at. And in that, you should try to evaluate companies based on the parameters that we talked about, and then take a view as to whether you want to invest in a company or not. Whether another Lehman brother is coming, sir, what is your view on Evergrande? Yeah, Evergrande is a big issue. Evergrande is a big issue, no doubt about it. They have roughly $300 billion of debt repayments that they have to do. But at this point of time, it does not look like a systemic crisis in the industry. No, I do not mean NPS in place of mutual funds. Darshan, sorry, I'll not be able to comment on crypto, because I'm not someone who has done enough analysis to talk about cryptocurrencies. In fact, I don't understand cryptocurrencies well, so I would suggest you to talk to a crypto expert. As I've always said, that try to waiting for a correction and then going into the market is not a good idea. Rather, you should just look at your company, whether your company is attractively priced or not. मार्केट में क्या हो रहा है उससे आप चिंता करोगे तो यू विल नेवर बी एबल टू एंटर द मार्केट. रादर यू शुड ऑलवेज ट्राई एंड टॉक स्पेसिफिक. Meanwhile, you can, always visit our page, resources page, where we have put up a lot of con call snippets, our discussions with the management, various investment avenues. I've given the link to our resources page also. So you can always check that up in the, you can always look it up. I am sure you'll enjoy it. I have Harshad Vaja, which is a better app website to do stock analysis, which you prefer? I think I have discussed openly all the websites that I do analysis upon. I think you should always look upon screener.in, valueresearch.in, and researchbytes.com. That would help you a lot. Thank you for the appreciation. You can always drop your feedback to me, or you can reach out to me anytime. Yes, the book name is Financial Shenanigans. Howard Schultz, Financial Shenanigans. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm happy that I could add value to this august audience. Thank you very much.
I think, sir, we are done with all the question answers and sessions. So, Rushabh sir, honestly speaking, all I can say at this moment is that sometimes at the end of the session, we do feel how great it would have been to have you on a live session. I mean, it was that kind of great session, honestly speaking, but sometimes we need to respect the situation where physical sessions are not possible. And you actually made this virtual session just like a physical session, because you made it an interactive one, and a chat box is more than enough to prove that thing. So it was actually a wonderful presentation, sir, on how not to lose money in equity. So I, on behalf of Ahmedabad branch, would like to thank you, not as a formality, but from the heart, actually from the heart, for enlightening us on all these crucial aspects on the crucial topic like this. Thank you, sir. Thank you.